Hi, and welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, cable, most of us have it in our house. I think we take it for granted. How we get it and what factors go into that decision are important to us all, plus a journalist roundtable after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome back to the program, and thanks for watching. Well, I don't know about you, but we turn on our television, we hook up our computers, and we run with them, and how that all got there may be somewhat strange to most of it, particularly to the technology-challenged people, mostly myself. There's a big battle brewing in Harrisburg over how all that occurs. Joining me to sort this all out is Ann Simonetti, who is president of the West Shore Council of Government. Ann, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And joining her is Dan Tunnell, who's the president of the Broadband Cable Association of Pennsylvania. I ought to call you Tunnelli because we got Simonelli and Madonna. Is that okay with you? No, he's looking at me. He said, no, that's not okay. But Dan, seriously, we're going to talk about an important subject, and it has to do with what I think we could call cable competition. I don't know that a lot of our viewers think very much about how cable particularly gets into their homes. They'll call a cable company, it gets installed. But talk a little bit about the framework in which that occurs.
Well, currently, Terry, the process by which cable is brought to a home is through the local government negotiating process. We negotiate with local governments throughout Pennsylvania to bring cable service to your local communities and represents a group of those communities in central Pennsylvania. This particular issue on Capitol Hill is one about granting special privileges to the phone companies so that they can bring that service. They do not need that special privilege. There are no barriers to entry right now. They can move into any community, negotiate with those communities, and bring that service to citizens. Let's start with
the basic framework. So what we have essentially is a federal law that regulates broadband cable access, and then the states implement that law. And in Pennsylvania now, it's all done on a community-by-community basis. So a municipality would negotiate, for example, with a cable operator to put cable into their communities. Do I got that about right?
That's exactly correct.
Keep going.
And up until now, franchise agreements have been done municipality by municipality. The legislation that has been proposed would eliminate that. They want it done at a statewide level.
Now, what's the disadvantage of that?
Well, you lose the local flexibility in doing it on a statewide level. It essentially says that one size fits all.
Right.
So that whether you're Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, or whether you're Marysville, which is where Ann is from, the same conditions will prevail if you have a statewide franchise, and it thus eliminates all of the local input and the local flexibility that brings citizens what they need in a particular community.
Now, and in order to accomplish that, what we essentially are dealing with is you'd have to change state law. Currently, the state law, I guess because of the way in which the federal law gets implemented, now correct me if I'm wrong about this, allows each local government to negotiate a deal with a cable company or two. Are there some communities that have more than one cable operator?
In some instances, absolutely. And at the West Shore COG level, we have a 10-year contract presently with the local provider who's around right now, which is Comcast. And so we invited Verizon to come in and talk to us, but they haven't made it there yet. As you probably know, they're dealing with the 4 counties down in the southeastern part of the state right now. And they have negotiated local, municipal franchise agreements with each of those municipalities in that area. So they're capable of doing it, and we welcome fair and equitable competition and have invited them to come in, as they are doing down in those 4 counties.
So let me understand this. So Verizon wants to change state law in order to create a state framework instead of a local framework, which would mean a deal would be done at the state level, and the rules would be established statewide instead of municipality by municipality.
Right. In a nutshell, it would move that whole process from local decision-making to the state bureaucracy. It would give it to an agency in the state that has absolutely no understanding of the dynamic that goes on local level, on the local level now, and grant it to state government.
All right, now, Ann, what are the advantages? You're a local government official. What are the advantages? Let's say are there any advantages to the taxpayer? I mean, obviously they pay a fee to the municipality for the right to hook up, let's say, cable. Do you all get some benefit that then accrues to the taxpayers?
We do get a franchise fee, yes, absolutely. We have 2,300 people in 2.5 square miles in Marysville, for instance, and we get on an average $26,000 a year. And that is paid to us by the local cable provider.
Now, Dan, when we're talking about cable, just so our viewers again have a clear picture of this, today what that really involves in a nutshell is it involves computer, the ability to use broadband to do computers. It involves video. So this is not just being able to turn on your TV, right? But it involves that whole range of services that you get through cable. Yes, no?
We bring that whole range of services right now. But what we're talking about really here is the local process that oversees the video portion of that. And up to this point, local governments have met the needs of their local citizens by talking with the cable provider in their community. And in our estimation, this is completely unnecessary legislation.
All right, but you need the cable first in order to be able to do the video, right? And what Verizon would say is that they would, in effect, if they get the statewide deal, they would provide it. They would provide it through their through the telephone. Is that it?
No, it would be through their fiber network.
Through their fiber network. Okay, keep going.
And they have already negotiated with over 100 communities in southeastern Pennsylvania. They have not been denied a franchise anywhere that they've negotiated. Every single community where they've taken the time to talk to the community has granted them the right to come into that community and deploy their fiber network.
All right, when we come back, we're going to continue with this discussion. This is an important discussion laying out the groundwork, I think, for all of us to understand this complex problem of video and how all that will work out in our homes. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, where we're talking about Verizon's proposed video franchise legislation with two folks from actually one of them, a local government official, Ann Simonetti, and Dan Tunnell, who is president of the Broadband Cable Association. Dan, let's talk about this. I don't know if to describe it as a concept or a practice, probably a practice, isn't it, of so-called build-out, about where all of this would go beyond the municipalities that currently have the service, if in fact there's a statewide a program as opposed to allowing each municipality to negotiate with various cable companies.
That's right, Terry. When we talk to municipalities, one of the key ingredients in that whole discussion is the issue of build-out. We agree with the municipality to build to every part of the community, regardless of socioeconomic status. In other words, there are no income criteria that are employed in our decision-making or in the community discussions. That means that everybody in the community, regardless of income, gets service. The only criteria may be geographic, meaning density of population. So we do not discriminate based on levels of income whatsoever. If we go with a statewide franchising proposal, what could happen, and is very likely to happen, is that winners and losers will be chosen by the provider who has a statewide franchise, thus cutting out people in each local community who don't meet certain economic criteria, and this is bad for local citizens.
Yeah, I mean, over the 8 years we've been on the air, we've gotten involved in some debates about this issue before in a slightly different context, and I always thought that the legislature had always intended, particularly to expand cable and broadband capacity to all parts of the state. Am I wrong about that? Has that not always been sort of the overarching philosophy of, regardless of who was governor and who was, or do I got that wrong?
No, I think that's very correct. In our Commonwealth, we've had a public policy since the inception of the Internet to build out as broadly as possible and thus overcome the digital divide.
Right.
If statewide franchising does get enacted, it will set that whole public policy back by picking winners and losers and who gets broadband.
Okay. And let's talk about something called right-of-way. What you hear this in the discussions all the time. Tell our viewers what that's about.
Okay. Presently, the cable provider comes to the local municipality and asks to use our rights-of-way. Right. And currently in the legislation, that is not protected. We don't want companies coming in and arbitrarily digging up our streets, trenching, putting in fiber optics.
That's all you need is that, or those calls from
yeah, exactly.
from the citizens, from the residents.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, somebody broke my water line or my sewer line and so on, because we do have, in the Commonwealth, we do have Pennsylvania One call, and anytime anybody's going to dig, they need to make that call first. So we want to protect that.
All right, well, look, we're out of time. I want to thank you both. Ann and Dan, Ann Tunnell. We can do that today on the program. But look, great to have you here. All right, it's time for our journalist roundtable. We're going to do a quick update on those important things that the legislature has been working on. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education, 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania, and by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Now joining me, as often is the case, is Amy Worden from the Philadelphia Inquirer and Robert Swift from Ottaway News to bring us a quick legislative update. All right, folks, let's start with this. Robert, is the legislature going to do very much between now and when they go home to campaign, or they're always campaigning?
Well, Terry, they have a few more days in late October, but I think that the focus has been on the crime, gambling reform, but some of the issues that they're not doing or don't seem to be prepared to do are with some of the so-called legislative reform, public reform, maybe making some of the cleaning up the lawmaker expense account system, making it more disclosure of that. Things about you see some hearings about reducing the size of the legislature, but I don't think that's going to go too far. Some of the public, like maybe making the open record law stronger applied to the legislature. That stuff seems not to be on the horizon.
Reform is out in the streets, so to speak, among the citizenry, where we have these 4 or 5 reform organizations that are out there. I know, Amy, you've written a lot about that, but the legislature seems kind of impervious at the moment to doing anything about it. Do you agree with Robert that it doesn't look like they're going to do anything?
Well, the big focus this fall has been on crime, as Robert said. And what was supposed to be a one-day session on crime sort of bled into 3 days with a massive number of bills and proposals under
consideration. Now, let me just interrupt you. I have in front of me, and I'm sure you've seen this, just a huge list of bills, or I should say proposals, because they're not really bills, which the legislature has debated. Over 90? Do I got that right?
100.
Oh, it's now up to 100?
Yep.
And they voted on these with no record kept. But everybody will have to answer in one form or another. Right.
Well, some are bills. Some are in bill form. Some are actually in committee. A number are, most I think are not. That is, they're just proposals at this point. The votes that were taken over the 3 days that spanned 2 weeks of session are non-binding. They're informal and they're anonymous.
But that's what I mean. There have been no movement at the moment to get any of these proposals moving through the they may be in, but they're not moving. Is that right?
Right. But I think what it did was allow at least for these proposals to be heard on the floor.
And a debate that was covered pretty widely.
Yes, that got aired. And now I think the lawmakers have a better idea of which ones are going to fly.
But let me ask you the big question. The big question. What are the 3 or 4 big ones that you think got the most coverage or created the most excitement? I know some of them have to do with the governor's proposal, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it.
Okay.
Which side you're coming from. I mean, on the Republican side, the biggest proposal was from the Speaker, John Frizzell, to add 10,000 police officers across Pennsylvania, from the smallest towns to
and everybody
the large
loved
cities.
that.
Everybody loves that. Well, who?
Get more cops.
So who can oppose that? Everybody says, we need more police on the streets. The problem is, of course, the cost. It's
Did they talk,
hundreds
Robert,
of millions
did they
of dollars.
talk about the cost? I didn't hear much about that.
There was sort of a side chapter to this, and some of the real sticking point on the cost was county commissioners and county officials are concerned because they would be drawn into some of the cost of funding this. And this is a time when they do, human services, our counties, and they've been complaining about funding cutbacks.
Counties don't deal directly with sort of police services. We have sheriffs, but they don't.
Sheriffs is about it.
Go out and go ahead.
Yeah, no, municipalities, the boroughs and the townships, some have it, but some do not. So, it would be an enormous burden because you're talking about proposed increases of 65%, 75%, 100%, or 200% in some of these communities.
But the big issue, it seemed to me, was what Philadelphia wanted. I mean, that's why we got there in the first place. Because
that's why we're there. The only reason there was any session on crime is because of the skyrocketing violence in Philadelphia. And Representative Dwight Evans, to his credit, Democrat, Philadelphia, pushed hard. In fact, essentially held the budget process hostage back in June to get this session on crime, the first one in 11 years.
All right, when we come back, we're going to take a break. We're going to talk about the 1 gun a month and what can a municipality or would the legislature allow a municipality to have some control over gun control laws. We'll deal with that. And I want to get to gaming with Robert Swift when we return after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers with Amy Worden and Robert Swift. All right, Amy, I think the biggest controversy was over this so-called 1 gun a month plan that Governor Rendell talked about. You'd be allowed to purchase 1 handgun a month. And the other one is giving Philadelphia certain rights over gun legislation that may or may not extend to other municipalities, but which now exists as a state prerogative. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh, by far the most controversial elements to the session on crime were the proposals coming from the Philadelphia Democrats specifically, that would limit gun purchases, handgun purchases to 1 a month. That was one key one. They wanted either a statewide 1 handgun a month, or they said simply allow Philadelphia, as it used to, have the ability to make its own gun law.
Did that go up or down? That went down.
Down, hard, overwhelming.
And then there was an assault weapon.
Yes, then an assault weapons ban, one that was statewide, and another that would allow Philadelphia to ban assault weapons. The case the Philadelphia Democrats made was, hunters don't need, fully automatic assault weapons. But no, that went down in resounding defeat, with a lot of Democrats also supporting the gun rights Republicans.
Particularly many Democrats, as you know, Robert, represent rural areas.
Western PA, you see 40, 50 votes going against gun control bills from the Democratic side normally.
Perhaps though the proposal that I think the Democrats were most shocked went down was was requiring the reporting of lost and stolen weapons. Lawmakers got up on the floor and said, Democrats, and said, incredulous, and said, why? What is the problem with reporting lost and stolen weapons? Well, Republicans said, led by Representative Darrell Metcalf, said, well, that's going to turn innocent people into criminals.
Got it.
By criminal, if they fail to report, then they're they're going to be dubbed the criminal.
All right. Before we go, Robert, I want to turn to you on this subject of gaming. There's sort of two big things: the crime that Amy's been following and focusing on, and gambling, and the fact we don't even have gaming up, and there are scores of amendments that have been proposed. Give us a quick update on where all that's going.
The Senate has passed what I consider a pretty substantive bill to reform the slots licensing process and the regulation of it. In fact, when the Senate Rules Committee reported a bill out, Senator Vince Hume, the architect of the original law, and Senator Jeff Piccola gave a high five to each other. That's not something you normally see when these things...
Conservative Republican from Dauphin County and a Democrat, Senator Fumo from Philadelphia, big supporter of gaming legislation.
And
Go ahead.
It shows a bipartisan agreement, and there's a lot of stuff in this bill. It ranges from making the controversial requirement that, slot machines had to go through a supplier state license. That's now optional.
Okay.
At the same time, little things like back in the spring, the House had said that, public officials can give complimentary services and drinks at lodging casino. The Senate took it out. Little things like that.
How about the 1% ownership?
They took that out.
So legislators will not be able to own up to 1% of an interest in a gaming.
They won't be able to own anything in the gaming company, any interest. And that's in the Senate bill now, has to go to the House. I mean, we're not sure when the House is going to take it up, but what was impressive is the number of things that they had in it, some more restrictions on the board members.
Right.
They did, the House had sort of tried to knock the Gettysburg casino proposal out. The Senate said that, let that go through the licensing process.
Okay. We have about 30 seconds. So crime and gaming, that's it? They're the big subjects you think that the legislature will deal with until after the election?
If they, the lobbying bill is out there, there was a lot of disagreement at the end of the spring session about what was to be in the bill. The Senate version is considered to be stronger than the House version.
Okay.
Whether that happens before election, it's hard to say.
All right, thanks for the great update. We'll have to see what they do with this so-called sign-a-die business, after the election when they come back. Typically, they've done that, passed scores and scores of bills. Not sure what will happen.
Well, there's talk that they may, yes.
All right, we're out of here. Amy gets the last word. See you next week. Stay well.